Wood Night is sponsored by I Would Like. This video is sponsored by Sleeping Duck. The headboard design is Shoji inspired, with an outer frame and thinner slats between. I would call those slats kumiko, which is the correct Japanese term for it, but this was much cruder than proper shoji. The frame was joined together using dominoes because I wanted something quicker than traditional mortise and tenon. Pocket holes, dowels and pretty much any other form of joinery would probably be fine too. The offcut angled pieces from the side rail caps were used for all of the thin slats, but first I needed to bring them back to square, so a few passes through the thicknesser removed the bevel. After all of those were dimensioned, I could easily batch out the slat pieces at the crosscut sled. The slat pieces joined together with half laps, and again I used the crosscut sled with the dado stack. The dado needed to be a hair wider, so by using a thin metal ruler I could adjust the width of the kerf by removing it after the initial cut. Because Natalie wanted these pieces a dark brown, they were stained ahead of assembly. If I was to redo this project today, I'd just spend that little bit extra and buy some nice honey-coloured blackwood. The small slats were dominoed into the frame, while the larger slats were held in with half laps. With the direction the half laps were facing, any pressure against the headboard means that the long slats couldn't slide forward. I'll breeze through assembly as it wasn't easy to get footage. I highly recommend slow and forgiving glues like liquid hide glue. If I wasn't working alone, I possibly would have used epoxy instead, as it can have a longer open time than PVA. With the headboard frame and clamps, I could start on making the headboard cap piece. I ripped some extra strips and then laminated it onto the full length piece. As the cap piece would get a curve, it didn't need to have the full length lamination in the centre. Using a drawing bow curve thing, I was able to trace out the curve I wanted onto a piece of 6mm plywood. That was cut at the bandsaw and the shape was faired using the spoke shave and sandpaper. Having the plywood template made it really easy to trace the curve I wanted onto the cap piece blank. Once that was traced, it was over to the bandsaw to cut out those curves. As it was a really gentle curve, I could leave my 19mm blade in.
Right, so I've got the cap piece flipped, and we're going to add a curve to the bottom as well. So this is just going to be a bit of a round over. So we're going to go 10mm in. That'll still give us a nice flat surface to actually glue this onto the rest of the bed head frame. And we're going to go 15mm up. Alright, so from here we're going to make sure this is nice and secure, and again take the spoke shave to knock off the corners, then use a rasp to really shape it.
If you ever want a hand tool to remove a lot of material quickly for shaping curves, I highly recommend these Shinto saw rasps. They cut so quickly but leave a really smooth surface. Well, for a rasp. Final smoothing of the cap piece curves was done using a bow sander. The frame needed to tilt back, so once it was dried, I took that over the table saw and ripped off a small bevel. I could have done this before assembly, but doing it afterwards was a good way to flush everything up and made clamping much easier. To actually attach the headboard frame to the lower headboard, there were a few disagreements in the Jenkins household, but ultimately my wife won out. She wanted something easily removable, and she also decided how close it would get to the mattress. I cut down some wood to make some brackets. I could then taper these with my taper cutting jig to match the bevel cut on the headboard. Here you can see all the parts that make up the bracket. The general idea is that this will wrap around the lower cap piece on the headboard. To attach it to the lower headboard, I'm using threaded inserts, which meant drilling out large clearance holes to get the cheesehead M6 bolts through.
So the brackets are glued to the headboard. The headboard is positioned centrally on the headboard rails, and I need to mark out where the threaded inserts are going to go. So this bolt will go all the way through and screw into this threaded insert. So to do that, I've got my 7mm drill bit. I'm just going to put a few dimples in where I need to drill for the threaded insert, which I think is an 8.5 or might be 9.5 mil hole, and then that gets threaded into the hole.